All right, what's up, Tampa? It is August 14th. For those of you just joining us, welcome to Tampa Talk. I'm John.
And I'm Dahlia. Thanks for tuning in.
All right, what are we talking about?
Well, this week we've got another development in the Rays Stadium conversation. Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office wrapping up a major human trafficking operation, and Florida's back to school sales tax holiday coming to an end. Plus, we'll get back in time to the most important labor victories in Tampa cigar history and take a look inside City Hall this week or last week.
Awesome. So let's talk about this week in the work first.
Yeah, well, I think, what we were chatting about before we started recording was just this idea of, we have a lot of ideals that we want to strive towards and even, from the academic ivory towers perspective, get researched and studied in our best practices. But then there's the practice side of things and really having to balance those ideals with pragmatism and, saying
it can be difficult.
it can be super difficult. And I know at the drop, it's one of the more difficult sites for us. So,
So one of the things when we were talking about this, I was like saying, and we had actually this week was like a phenomenal example. So, okay, let's start with the philosophical, right? In the philosophical, I would say that I believe deeply in the principle of hospitality and the work of the drop. And a lot of the work of WellBuilt Cities is to make a place for the stranger to come and sit at the table, that we overcome the kind of distance between us and the stranger with hospitality. Hospitality is a very difficult call for anyone because it actually challenges our instinct to survive. Like if a stranger is knocking at your door, or even in like evolutionary history, it's like you don't welcome the stranger. They might bring disease. They might bring danger, anomaly, but often they do bring gifts. And so what I have found is I've come to deeply believe in an openness to the future, an openness to the other, to the stranger. It is a kind of vulnerability though.
Mhm.
And so I believe in that as a philosophical principle. I mean, almost to the lens of a faith statement. But then at some level I go, yeah, but now we're running an organization where we have set up a house of hospitality for the poor, a place for people to come in. It's funny, we met actually this week because I'm thinking now about security. So
Yeah.
security is the opposite in some way of hospitality. Like, how do we keep our volunteers and our staff safe? How do we keep our guests safe? And yet at the same time still welcome in the stranger, the anomaly, the person that can bring harm or maybe has some mental illness or some struggles or whatever. We actually met with a former FBI agent this week who's like
Cool.
a head of a security for some other agencies. And he came in and he toured our building and kind of audited where our cameras are and asked us a bunch of questions. Very, very helpful stuff. And actually, he was very encouraging. He said, we've done a pretty good job given like our limited experience and kind of what we were looking out for. But he's like, yeah, but there's like this issue of your business model. He's like, so the door's just open to anyone to walk in? We're like, well, yeah, that's kind of the thing we do here. It's a drop-in center. And so there is this really interesting way where I go, the ideal is there is no door.
Yeah.
There is no barrier to entry whatsoever. And then there's the pragmatic reality, the responsibility to make sure that everyone in the room is actually safe. And there's a real tension and challenge there that I don't know. I feel like illustrates maybe a little bit of that tension between you hold this ideal, but good luck.
Yeah. And we've been struggling with this for thousands of years. You actually just made me, when you thought about, these safe measures to hospitality, I recently went to Turkey, and when I was visiting a ruin named Ephesus, which is literally, I think, one of our oldest cities that we still have remnants of. And they had bathhouses. The first thing you did when you entered the city was have bathhouses.
Mhm.
And you were required as somebody entering the city to strip naked and shower. And they wanted to inspect your body for any disease and illness. You had to shower because, showers weren't something you had every day. You might go months without showers. And so like those were their requirements on entering their city. And it was a public health safety measure that they
That's
developed.
exactly the kind of thing.
And
That's right.
there was conflict around that, right? People like think about everybody being armed and, being vulnerable in that moment. You're like butt naked, literally in a new environment.
Well, it's a way of saying you're welcome here, but there's some things you got to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a difficult thing to an open door. It could be a potential barrier for somebody, right? To go, but at the same time, to go for the sake of our home, it's like sticking a metal detector in front of the school or something. It's like we shouldn't have to do this, but also we want to, it's like it becomes a symbolic representation of a almost a rite of passage into the place.
And I think it gets even stickier when you actually don't have such a physical infrastructure like the drop, where it's like I have a door, I don't have a door, I have security, I don't have security. When it's the like theory that you're practicing. So for example, I think about governance, and obviously we want democratic processes to governance, and we want limited rules or regulations, and allow for leadership teams to develop those things on their own. But then if they don't, somebody needs to set the rules. And so that's even harder, I think, sometimes for people to grasp, because when a rule like that you write on a paper, it's a lot harder to see where that came from, especially like 10 years later, where that rule came from and like why it's there and how it evolved. And, at the end of the day, you just see the final rule versus, and so I think about the ideals versus the pragmatic. I think if you would have asked 17-year-old me to come up with like a governance model for working groups or for well-fed or for any of the work with for the kinship free market, I would have been like, yeah, everybody can take whatever they want. And we'll all participate in this way and it will all be great. And then
Wildly naive.
yeah. And then
Yeah, that's right.
go to practice
It's like, actually, no, you can only have one of the meats.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And
I'm
like,
sorry.
I will stand and
I'm
stare
not
at
actually
you.
sorry. You're
Yeah.
welcome for the one.
Yeah.
Right. Because we love everybody here.
Yeah. And it's
That's
been
right.
really
That's
like
great.
challenging. But again, I think when you have the physical and you have the tangible, it's still easy to like see, and people really critique the intangible, but it's still practice. And so I think that's what I struggle with a lot of the time too, is that intangible practice of things like leadership models, governance structures,
What do you mean intangible practice?
like a rule, our governance structure for Homegrown Hillsborough. That's not something that everybody can see when they walk into a room, right? And yet it's taken 4 or 5 years to develop and to establish the rules and to put the parameters in place. And there's county contracts and MOUs, and like all of that is like not the same as having a physical structure and a security camera. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
But it's
right,
still
right.
practicing the ideal of collaborative working groups, right? Or a collaborative cross-organizational leadership, right?
Super difficult.
Super
There's
difficult in
different
practice.
egos involved. There's different logos involved. There's
Yeah.
wildly different interests, and it's like where the rubber hits the road. Pragmatism is really important for us to not. I think it's interesting to have to live in the gray and say, I hold ideals. I have a North Star I want to aim at, but I'm also going to be realistic and not choose hills to die on that
Yeah.
stop momentum in the good that we're
Yeah.
trying to do right here.
And I think that's the takeaway, is we live in the gray. And
We live in the gray.
And we need to, like, operating in the gray is the hardest part of every, I think, industry. I think because it's community-based work that we do, it's especially difficult because you're navigating so much gray versus, if you're working in finance, your gray is just the financial system. Or if you're working in manufacturing, it's just the manufacturing system. We got that. We have interdisciplinarity on steroids going on.
Oh yeah. I mean, someone came in with a very pragmatic, a very real, concrete problem with a particular woman with a mental illness that has a daughter that is underage, that is a dependent, it's just like, as they like layered this story together, it was just like the complexity
Yeah.
of this problem.
Yeah.
Is so like, it was like 6 smart people sitting around in a room going, what
and I think
turn can we make?
Yeah. And I think that's like what I want to maybe leave on, is that trying to find that balance, the more you're in the space, to not lose maybe some of your naivety, or not lose some of your hopefulness, like the optimism in the space. Because I do find myself sometimes in a conversation where somebody's like, I have this great idea and we need to, I've used this example before, rescue food from grocery stores, and I'll just start my own food pantry and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I actually don't recommend you do that,
It's adorable. But it's also, in the end, it's a beautiful impulse.
Totally. Yeah. And that's what I mean. Like, trying to manage while working in the gray, not getting jaded, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and maintaining optimism among pragmatism.
So if any of you are interested, we're not going to get into this now. If you're interested, there's a philosopher called Paul Ricoeur that has this concept of the second naivete. So he's like, you can't stay naive. And he uses this in like faith constructs, like, oh, the whole thing fell apart. But it's like beliefs or hopefulness or whatever. It's like, it's so naive to think that. And then you like leave that and you get like mature, complicated thought. And it's almost a deconstruction. But he's like, but then in full maturity, you return. So it's like, you think sharing a sandwich with a hungry person on the street is actually going to change anything? It's not going to change anything. And you realize, like, oh my God, the depths of poverty in this construct. And then in the end, you come back to go, yeah, but we could sit and have a sandwich.
Yeah.
And we could be friends with one another. And Yeah.
Totally. It's
Let's
pretty
get
cool.
into let's get into what
This week in Tampa
yeah,
history.
let's do it.
Yeah. So we're going to go back to August 14th, 1899.
Right. This one brings us back into the cigar factories of Ybor City and West Tampa. That day marked the end of what became known as the famous wait strike.
So cigar manufacturers had begun weighing the tobacco they handed out to workers. And that might sound like a pretty minor workplace policy, but the cigar makers saw it very differently. They considered it an insult and, more importantly, a threat to the independence and control they traditionally had over their craft.
Yeah, so it really wasn't just about weighing tobacco, it was about control over the workplace. Cigar makers had long operated with a great deal of autonomy, almost seen as artists over how they worked. They had some real autonomy. And the introduction of the scales represented management exerting more control over their what they saw as an artistic process. The disagreement eventually turned into a bitter strike and it lasted for months.
And on August 14th, the workers won.
Yeah, so management finally gave in. The scales were removed. Cigar workers successfully won their demands, and this became an important kind of precursor to the much larger labor conflicts that would repeatedly erupt in Tampa's cigar industry over the decades that follow.
Tampa cigar history isn't just about factories and cigars. Tampa is also the site of immigration, mutual aid societies, unions, political organizing, worker independence, all kind of woven into the Tampa fabric. And I recently learned that we were the second ever location in Florida of Rotary, which is one of the most,
All right. Yeah.
bit largest international organization, civic organization. And not only were we the second largest, we were the reason International Rotary became a thing because it was a Tampa Cuban who then went to Cuba
Really.
and shared the concept. And then that was brought over to Spain, I believe, from those conversations. And then I think the Spanish chapter opened or something like that. But it was essentially this Tampa man traveling to Cuba that led to Rotary International.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we weren't just the second club in Florida. We were the reason or precursor to International Rotary.
By the way, I love this stuff, guys. One of the things, I mean, I love this city. This is the reason we do Tampa Talk. We want to kind of know what's going on in our city. But like, I have actually been asked before, like, why I think Tampa is like strategic and important. And this story just reminds me, it echoes this thing, like how Tampa's been so significant globally, so significant throughout the nation. And one of the things is, you've heard me say this, but I think it's important to kind of keep echoing and reminding myself, like, Tampa is small enough in terms of geography and population that their real change can be like the needle can actually be moved here. It's not New York City.
Yeah.
But because of sports, because of brand, because of reputation, things that happen in Tampa ripple out and have massive effects. So it's doable in that it's small, and it's strategic in that it has the acclaim and the importance of a major city.
Yeah.
And for some reason that story just reminded me of that.
And our modern history is pretty young. Like we've been around forever, like from these stories of early Tampa days. But like the 60s is really when Florida is, let's just say maybe when some of those rules and regulations started getting put on paper, right? In the like 1950s, 60s, maybe 1930s to 60s if you really want to like widen the window. But that allows for us to be a little bit more be creators of our city's kind of path, I think, versus like you said in New York, they've been, hammering it out for the entire history of the United States, right?
Yeah. So let's jump into the city council spotlight. So last week's city council meeting was a little unusual compared to most of the regular meetings. There was not actually a ton on the agenda, and a lot of the business was actually kind of generated by the council itself.
So one of the first items involved Tampa's Charter Review Commission.
Right. So council received a brief update from the commission responding to a long list of questions and recommendations council previously sent over for consideration. And this process matters because the charter is essentially Tampa's local constitution.
So any changes ultimately have to go before voters. The Charter Review Commission makes recommendations, and while council isn't automatically required to accept everything they suggest, those recommendations are likely to carry considerable weight when council eventually decides what proposed charter amendments should appear on the ballot. So that conversation is still very much underway.
So another item is something council member Luis Vieira has been talking about for basically his entire time on council, a formal requirement for long-term police and fire master plans.
So the proposed ordinance would require the Tampa Police Chief and Tampa Fire Rescue Chief to return to council every 3 years with updated master plans for their departments. There's also a draft executive order from the mayor laying out what those plans should include.
And it's pretty comprehensive. The plans would include current and projected staffing levels, response time, performance, and service demand, capital needs like new stations and facilities, vehicles, apparatus, equipment, community risk assessments and hazard identification, population growth, future development, strategic priorities, and ultimately what resources and funding each department is going to need.
Which is especially important in a city that keeps adding people and development. And the idea here is to create a regular long-term planning process so the city can anticipate those needs instead of always reacting to them. So basically, kind of like we were saying, we kind of still got a
Dig
bit
it.
of a blank
I
slate.
dig
Yeah.
it. There was one item that kind of made us laugh a little bit after something we said last week.
So last week it talked about a regional infrastructure accelerator grant, and this week council has a nearly $1 million contract extension for consultant services.
So for perspective, that's roughly the same amount the city spends to support the expanded Route 1 bus service. So nearly $1 million for consulting.
There were a few other financial items worth mentioning this week.
Right. So the city appropriated another 1 million from interest earning to the logistics and asset management department. Council also adopted an annual stormwater services and capital improvement assessment. And importantly, there are no proposed changes to those fees.
All right. Are you ready? We're going to talk about the Rays
The
Stadium.
Rays Stadium. It's the word of it every day.
Every day. So let's stay with City Hall because there's another development in the never ending Rays Stadium conversation.
Yeah, so Councilmember Bill Carlson has proposed a different way of structuring the city's contribution to a potential stadium deal. The important difference is that his proposal attempts to move away from direct city and CRA funding.
So under this framework, under the current framework, the city would contribute approximately $80 million, while the Community Redevelopment Agency, the CRA, would contribute another $100 million.
Carlson's proposal would eliminate both of those direct contributions, and instead it would create a separate funding pool using new property tax revenues generated by development within a special district surrounding the project.
So that's referred to as tax increment financing, which is often called TIF or TIF. The basic idea is that a development occurs as development occurs and property values rise, the additional tax revenue generated by that growth gets reinvested into infrastructure within the district. So Carlson is describing this version as tax revenue sharing. And you'll actually see this if you go to your tax bills, you'll see sometimes like I know this is true of like if you live down in Valrico, Bloomingdale is like a big development. You look at your property tax bill, it will say Bloomingdale tax. And it's because when they were developing that area, they said, we're going to forever, this isn't a city, this is unincorporated. We're going to forever need financing to maintain your boulevards and things like that. And that would be tax increment financing.
Yep. So to be clear, that money wouldn't go directly to the Rays. Under the proposal, the money would flow through a community development district and could only be used for infrastructure owned by the city, county, and state. Carlson argues that this avoids taking existing money away from other city projects.
So there's also a Drew Park component to this that may be particularly important to people living and working in Drew Park. The proposal would separate the existing Drew Park community redevelopment area from the stadium financing district. That would give Drew Park control over its own redevelopment funding and potentially another 30 years to manage its own development, something that neighborhood has been asking for. So the proposal would redirect half of the downtown series funding into a broader infrastructure investment fund. And Carlson argues downtown would still receive more funding than any other CRA district, even after that change.
Apparently, the Rays are at least open to discussing it. That's what Carlson says. So this does not mean there's a stadium deal, but after weeks of tension between the mayor's office and city council and the CRA and the county and the Rays, this is at least another possible financing structure now on the table.
And we'll see how the property tax amendment
I know your hope is super high.
in November really changes this conversation or not.
Maybe we stay naive.
Yeah.
Maybe we stay naive.
The Hillsborough, shifting gears totally, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office announced the results of a major 2-month human trafficking investigation this week.
Yeah, the operation was called Operation Relentless Summer. From June through August, detectives from the Sheriff's Office Human Trafficking Section, Internet Predator Squad, and Sexual Predator Unit worked together on a variety of enforcement efforts.
And so by the end of the operation, 116 people had been arrested, and investigators also recovered 5 victims.
Yep. 3 adult women and 2 children. According to the Sheriff's Office, investigators used several different strategies throughout the operation. That included residential search warrants, investigations connected to activity on the dark web, undercover online conversations, and hotel and motel operations.
Super impressive what they're able to do in these things. So this was a coordinated operation across multiple types of multiple different investigation types, and then over that 2 month period. Plant City police closed the investigation into a family's death. So they released new information this week about a tragic case involving four members of the same family who were found dead back in May, which we actually talked about.
After months of investigation, police say they now believe that Haley Dempsey killed her mother and two of her children before taking her own life. Investigators say that in the early morning hours of May 3rd, Dempsey shot and killed her mother at the family home before leaving with her three children.
Security footage later captured her approaching another home and asking someone for help. The residents stepped away briefly to get their partner, but when they returned to the door, Dempsey and the children were gone. Later, police responded near West Tever Street and North Wheeler Street after someone called 911 reporting a woman screaming outside. Officers found Dempsey with a gunshot wound to the head. Her 4-year-old and 4-month-old children were also found dead, but a 2-year-old child survived.
Yeah. Police believe Dempsey fired at all three children, but missed the toddler before shooting herself in the temple. Investigators recovered a gun nearby, and the forensic testing found residue on Dempsey's hand that police say connected her to the shootings. I mean, just super incredibly tragic
Yeah,
for everyone, for us, for the family, for the community. Just this is horrific.
you can't even imagine the series of events that led to like asking for help, and then yeah, it's awful. Um, Well, to end, I think on the news this week, we have if you're still doing some back to school shopping, you've got a few days remaining in Florida's back to school sales tax holiday.
Yeah, this year's month-long holiday began July 20th and continues through August 20th, so you have a few more days. Eligible items include clothing, shoes, backpacks priced at $100 or less. Personal computers, related accessories also qualify as long as they cost less than $1,500.
And those savings can add up quickly, especially if you're shopping for multiple kids.
Yeah, they definitely can. State officials estimate Florida families saved approximately $450 million statewide during last year's tax holiday. So if the school supply list is still sitting around on the counter, this is your reminder the clock's ticking. So time to go get those things taken care of.
All right, events going on this weekend. So we want to remind you that you can visit at WellFed Community on Instagram to see our social, like all our different events going on throughout the week. But we want to highlight a few for you. So we have our Community Food Ambassador program that meets on the third Saturday of every month. So we'll be meeting tomorrow. They meet over at the Bethesda Community Garden in. You can actually just search it up that way and it pops up. And you can also just visit www.thewellfedcommunity.org to learn more about the CFA program by navigating to our programs tab. Also, starting to September 1st, I was going to say December, September 1st, starting September, the first Saturday of every month, we'll have a new food demonstration that will be taking place at the Florida Blue Center in West Shore from 10:30 to 12:30 a.m. This is going to be a recurring event, so you can catch us there the first Saturday of September, the first Saturday of October, the first Saturday of November, and check into a food demonstration. And then there'll be other stuff going on in the Florida Blue space. And then Root Awakening Farms Night Market takes place on the last Friday of every month. So Friday, August 28th at 5:30 over on 110th East Hanlon Street. And again, you can just search Root Awakening Farm and you'll be able to get there the last Friday of every month at 5:30.
And on rare occasions, when the month ends on a Friday, you are going to have a very busy weekend where you do that on Friday night and then the first on Saturday.
Yep. We will. These recurring events are the name of the game.
That is an inevitability.
And one more recurring event we have going on is the Conscious Party, which is on the second Thursdays at the Drop from 6 to 8. Anything you want to share about the Conscious Party, John?
Yeah, well, actually, when you're hearing this, we just had one last night, which I'm on my way to right after recording this. But I'm going to go ahead and say it was awesome. You should have been there. They always are. But this is I like to call it like an open source party. So we're doing this at the Drop. It's from 6 to 8. It's an open mic, but it's an open mic, an open table, an open door. Bring a friend, bring a poem to share, bring a song, bring a joke, bring a whatever. And if you want to bring a dish or something to share, it is kind of potluck style. I am kind of seeding that to make sure we have some food here in the beginning. But we're going to go ahead and just call it second Thursdays from 6 to 8 every month. We would love to have you guys come out and join us. Really excited to kind of get together and get conscious together. This is when I say open mic, it's a very, very, very open mic. It's an easy mic to feel like you can get on no matter what your skill levels are. There will be people that'll blow you away. There'll be people that maybe aren't usually on a microphone, all good. But the real work of art, the thing that I think is the gem worth coming to see is the mosaic piece of art that is the voice of the community over the course of the night. I absolutely love doing these. I'm super glad we've been bringing it back and that we now have an awesome place at the drop to do it. We hope you guys will join us there.
And while we're talking about the drop on September 10th at 11 a.m., you
Yep.
can join us at the drop for the grand opening of Pioneer Medical's space at the drop. So you can catch us there. And then finally, the last thing we want to remind you of is that on Thursday, September 24th, we'll be having our inaugural WellBuilt.city's fundraiser called The Table. And so you're able to go to givebutter.com/WBC The Table to get an individual ticket. And there is still some group sponsorship opportunities available.
Yeah, if you have a group you want to bring, I recommend sponsoring a table. I think table sponsorships at like $1,000. That'll come with some stuff, and there's 8 seats. But it's a great way to like host a table at the table and kind of bring your crew and make sure you guys all sit together. We appreciate any support you guys can offer, as always. By the way, if you go to any of these events or you have any news stories that are coming up, please do hit us up at WellBuilt Cities on Instagram. We love hearing from you guys. I think that'll do it for this week. Obviously there's going to be, we'll come back many times talking about the raise, again and again and again. There's a plenty of things that we're going to talk about. But we'll just keep moving forward. Yeah. So anyway, guys, if you would just comment, rate, share the show. You get tampatalk.xyz. You'll go directly to the podcast, wordonthestreets.xyz. You'll get this in your inbox, every Friday morning at 6 a.m.
All right. Well, that's what we're talking about, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And until next time,
Y'all be good.